Kia ora katoa koutou tātou I roto I tēnei pō. Kia ora everybody, Che Wilson here from Te Pai Waho, e me I kau atu ana kia tātou I roto I tēnei pō. So hope everybody's having a good night, and I'm going to open us up and then get straight into it. Okay, nō reira e me I kau ana tēnā koutou, kia kare kia tātou. Mai a maranga o karangona te rangi e tūnei, mai a maranga o karangona te papea takotoaka nei. Te putanga te kōrero, te putanga te wānanga, ka puta ki wāo ki te wai au, ki te ao marama. Turuturu au I te waka maua kia tīna, ui e, taiki e. Taiki e kia tātou. So kia ora everybody, Che Wilson here from Te Pai Waho, and continuation of Tangihanga, and this is kaupapa number 6. And so tonight we are talking about post-Tangihanga. So leaving the marae, going to Takahi the house, hari mate, kawe mate, and returning back into reality. So that's the kaupapa for tonight. And over the last previous 5 sessions, we've covered an intro right through to the first 24 hours, the next few days, the do's and don'ts at a really generic level, and through to what happens on the funeral day, etc. And I think the key thing is that this is just sharing thoughts on what happens at different parts of the country, not specific to me as Ngāti Rangi or me as Wanganui, but just sharing thoughts generally. And then where I am going specific, then I'll note those bits as well. So kaupapa number 6. And so last week we talked about the hakari after the ceremony, after the funeral service, the burial, and then staying the night. Then, because what used to happen is people would do the Takahi, the house, the same day and often before the hakari. And sometimes people will still do that if everything's handy. But when so many of us live away from our marae, it's often done the next day. Or only a small group will go and do it after everything is finished on the day of the funeral. And there's a kōrero that we say, mā te ākari e wakanua, mā te karakia e wakakaa, mā te Takahi Whare e wakarite. And so it's the hakari that lifts the tapu, karakia that gives you strength, and the tramping of the house that prepares you to go back into reality. And that reality, as many of you will know, is all good until people leave. And once people leave, things then get hard. Which is why tangi is so important, that you cry throughout the whole tangi, and then afterwards as well, but actually manifest the word for this event that you've been through for the last few days, and that is tangi. And so you go to wakarite the house, and different people will do it differently, and you take the cues from the minister, the tohunga, the kaumātua, whoever is leading it for you, to make sure that you go through the process to bless the house. And the key component of that is to, if the waira of the person is still lingering, is to send them on their journey. But in addition to that, it's also about reawakening the house, because the house has been asleep for the last few days while you've been away, and so it's a chance to awaken the house and put some love into it to help you as you then navigate your reality. Drinking. A lot of people will have memories of people drinking at tangi and all of that. Most of our marae don't allow alcohol anymore. But you will find that some will still have a drink after the takahi of the house. the most important thing is to be sensible, because there can easily be things where people get carried away. And when you're tired and emotionally drained, alcohol can then be the thing that pushes you over, and it starts to create rarurarus. However, there is a tikanga that I practice, and that's a one shot of whiskey. And it was practiced throughout the country at one stage, but then people took the one shot too far and then just did bottles and kegs, and it loses its impact. But the origins of the one shot, usually of a whiskey, either the last night or at the blessing of the house, is to just lift you up, to hiki your wairua, to oho your wairua, so that it awakens you and takes you to a place of moving from, especially if you've been miserable and starting to get depressed. It was intended to lift and hiki you up. And so that was the purpose of that. And depending on where I am, I'll practice that. And I'm not a whiskey drinker, so I'm not going to carry it on. But that's the origin of it, and it's just that people have got silly. So that's the Takahi Whare, and where possible, it's really nice to then stay another night with your whānau so that they can slowly ease back into their reality. Then after that, there are all these hui that you go to. And wherever you go, you will carry the mate of your loved one that's passed. And some people call that a hari mate, some people call it a kawe mate. And at the funeral, there will also be key people that may tono. They may ask for you to take the mate of your loved one to their marae or to the next hui that you're all gathering at. And the purpose of that is to connect. Wai mahana paku. And the purpose of that is to connect and take the memory of that person who's passed to those marae where that person connects to, or where the partner connects to. And some people call that a hari mate, some people call it a kawe mate. And a heap of people ask, well, what's the difference? What's the right term? It's not for me to say what the right term is, because some people say kawe mate. I was raised with the term hari mate. But when it comes to the language, haria mai, kawe atu. So when you're taking your mate somewhere, you are doing a kawe mate. When you're at home waiting for that kawe mate to arrive, it's a haria mate for you that are on the home side. And it's a kawe mate for those bringing that mate. But you use the term that you know. And the most important thing is this is another chance for you to cry, to let out the pain and to help you deal with grief and loss. Visiting the urupa, I've had a few comments about visiting the urupa, and that a lot of people go to the urupa now, take a few bottles or take a heap of bottles and get pissed. Frankly, that's not tikanga. And even if it's been practiced for generations, it's actually a bad form of dealing with your grief. I get it. It is a form of grief management. But the moment that you're losing any clarity, you're allowing yourself to be susceptible to other rubbish. And what I mean by that, because people start to park up at the urupa, start to have a kai at the urupa. And the reason why we separate things with our dead is because of disease and getting sick. And everybody go, yeah, well, it's all disinfected and it's all safe, and they're 6 feet under. But it's not just physical, mate that can affect you, but also you can then enter into the mental and wairua, the hinengaro and wairua space when you're going there for a feed, for a party, and for a pisa. And I do get that with the dislocation from culture, people might not know how to grieve at the marae, but we've got to find the balance, and we've got to be talking with each other to help each other out, because people will sleep at the urupa, they'll fall asleep, and they'll do all of these different things which just aren't good for you. And yet you might be by your loved one, but who are all of the kino people lying there? And yet we might be romantic, oh, but they're all our family. But in the same breath, some will still be focused in, some would have still been kino people. And if those people's wairua haven't left those places, they can then easily come and affect you and play with your hinengaro and your wairua. People might say that's a load of rubbish, and kei te pai, that's over to you. But when you have to go and do karakia to help people and lift all of that, you get to realise that it's very real as well. So when you do go to the urupa, just remember that you go there for a time. And even if you want to stay there forever, you have to find some strength to take yourself back, to bring you back into the world of Te Ao Marama, back into the world of light. Otherwise, ka wakamomori atu. And that's when the word wakamomori is appropriate, because you're taking your place to the cliff, because you're struggling with dealing with it. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that's where you need to make sure that you've got people to look after you to bring you back. And that's where the word wakamomori was traditionally used, is where you're on the fine line, but you don't take yourself over. You're just threatening so much for your loved one that it's making you sick. There's the other point to note that some tribes, you're only allowed to go to the urupa at certain times. My own area, we can go whenever we want to go. But some people, their tribes, they're only allowed to go at certain times. And I know up north, they have some strict times where you are allowed to go and when you're not allowed to go. And it may be that way in other areas as well. You then also get other tribes who will not hang up a photo until the year has passed. And they will try not to do too much talking about that person or until the year is up. And so each tribe will deal with things differently. But that whole focus on the importance of a year, I'll cover in the next session. But just wanted to give a general overview of some of the key points that happen post-tangi. In addition to that, there's all of the payments that you have to do. And so when you're writing down the koha of everybody that's giving a koha, when you then go to their tangis, the tikanga is then you either match or increase what they gave. And this isn't about getting one over the other, but it's about remembering, okay, they've given this, okay, we need to give back. And another really important thing to remember post-tangi is the next tangi that's at that marae, you should be there. You should be there as a family to help the next family because they helped you. But also it's your way of giving back to your marae. Rather than you just turning up on the last day. And yep, everybody has work, but remember all of those that took time off work to look after you. And so this is about building reciprocity and giving back to each other again. So just need to be mindful of that. And in addition, when there are other tangi elsewhere, making sure that you go to acknowledge the aroha that they gave to your family. There's a question I saw around women carrying. Should women be allowed to carry two pāpaku? Traditionally, the answer is no. Simply because if the body was contagious, better that a man get affected than you affect the house of tomorrow. And so that's the origins of that. And all of the dealing of the two pāpaku was traditionally done by men as well, so that any communicable diseases, if they affect the man, it's okay because you can find another sperm donor. And as crass as that sounds, that's just how our old people saw it. And so that's the tikanga of it. And I personally don't agree to women carrying, though it's done at a heap of marae, because then do everything else. And I get that we are in changing times, but we have to find ways to have these discussions rather than just saying, well, I want to, because there's a lot of things I'd like to do too, but they're not my role. I reckon I'd be pretty good at some of them too, but hey. And that doesn't answer the question fully, Amy, because that's a real good wānanga discussion. But I do note that things are changing and have been changing for some time. Okay. So I think in closing, there's a heap of discussions that are required, and don't leave it until the tangi. Have your discussions with your whānau, because what I'm sharing is what I know and what I've observed and learnt from other places, not necessarily going into the detail for those tribes. I can easily talk about home, but that's better for at home. Kati, I'm writing a book about all of this Tangihanga stuff, and hopefully we'll have it out for the middle of the year. But Kati ake, I'm going to cover unveilings, the returning of ashes and all of that next week. Nā reire, mihi ana kia koutou, kia tātou katoa, kia wakaere ake e nei kupu ki te tā nui o rangi nui e tūnei, au mie ui e tai ki e. Kia ora tātou.